And that's Matthew 14:22-23. And it reads, "And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee unto the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore did thou doubt? This morning, for a few minutes, I want to preach sermonically speaking, using the words, keeping our mind right. Keeping our mind right. Keeping our mind right starts by us choosing to keep our mind on Christ. We find the disciples have been sent by Jesus out onto the lake at night. Their job is to sail across to the other side. No problem. These men are fishermen. Every one of them certainly had to learn how to sail at some point of their lives. So it was not a big deal for them that Christ sent them onto the lake ahead of himself. Is it okay if I take some time to set this up? See, the Romans divided the night into watches of 3 hours each. And there were 4 watches to the night. During the first watch of the night, the disciples were faced with great anxiety. Yet they kept on rowing. Some may have even began to get discouraged. And in the second watch of the night, I'm sure, just as they were tempted to give up, some of the disciples said, Come on, we can do this. We've done this before. So they kept on rowing. In the third watch of the night, they still had not gone very far from the shore, but maybe there was a lone voice, or perhaps 2, who said, Come on, y'all, we can do this. We've done it before, don't give up now. And they kept on rowing. So in the fourth watch of the night, there was utter despair. I imagine the disciples said to one another, We're doomed. We can't do it. We can't go any further. We've lost. The sea is far too great for us. See, church, when things seem difficult for us, we may start to think that Christ is far. But I stopped by to tell you that this thing that you're going through, God is using this to get you through. God is using this to build a character of patience, a character of perseverance, and a character of greatness. Look at your neighbor and shout, Just keep rowing. God will sometimes allow us to struggle so that we might see the reality of who he really is. So that we may see his power. So that we may see his greatness. So that we may see that he will never leave us. Now when Jesus was seen walking on water, the disciples said, It's a ghost. And they grew very scared. Jesus saw that they were scared and said, Don't be afraid. And that brings me to my first point this morning. Keeping your mind right erases the very presence of fear. When the disciples were the scariest, my English class forgive me for it. They had ever been before. Jesus said, Cheer up, for I am with you. Church, if we're going to keep our minds right, we must allow Christ to take the storms out of us so that he may take us out of the storm.
All right.
When they were at the scariest, when they were at their most scared moment, the Lord said, cheer up. Why, church? Because he is with them. We as God's children don't have to be afraid to keep struggling for the benefit of others. Actually, we should long to bear one another's burdens. When one of us falls short, we as a whole should be right there to pick them up, or at least be willing to pick up where they left off in order for God's mission to be accomplished. It may call for us to go into unfamiliar places. It may call for us to step out of our traditional rituals. And it may call for us to get out of our comfort zone. But I assure you that it will be all good because Jesus will be with us. When we truly believe that Christ will never leave us nor forsake us, we'll go into the streets to win souls. We'll serve with joy and gladness, and we'll reach beyond ourselves to empower the people of God, serving with love, peace, and unity, but never choosing to serve through fear. Notice I said choosing to serve through fear. The choice is yours. David said it best in Psalm 23:4 when he said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art not with me. See, church, we don't have to fear, because when we allow our minds, our hearts, and our eyes to be fixed on Christ, according to Romans 8:28, all things work together for them who love God. So we don't have to be afraid to face the big, the bad, or the ugly things that come into our lives, because it's going to work out for our good. So I urge you to stay focused on the mission and not on the storm. However, there's a certain amount of faith that we need to do well in this Christian walk. If we are serious about keeping our minds right, it will require a presence of active faith. We'll find in the text that Jesus sent his disciples before him in a boat while he sent the multitudes away. Now, this was right after Jesus had performed the miracle of the 5 fish and the 2 loaves of bread. Now, in the 4th wake, the time just before daybreak, the darkest hour, Jesus appears. And I assume all of the disciples were afraid, because the word says they were afraid. Does your word say that? Now it begins to get interesting, because though all 12 of the disciples got into the boat, Peter is the only one to speak. We also find that Peter had an active presence of faith, because Peter replies, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you onto the water. So Jesus invites Peter to come, and Peter gets out of the boat and begins walking on the water towards Jesus. See, Peter recognized the Savior's voice. We as a church must grow to the point where we recognize the voice of our shepherd. John 10:27 says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Peter allowed the simple word come to be enough to let him get out of the boat. We have to be able to recognize Christ's voice, then get up and act as soon as he speaks. In spite of the doubters that say what we're doing is hopeless, in spite of the thought that what we see is unreachable, rejecting and neglecting the feelings of fear, we must choose to begin to act as soon as our Christ speaks. Because it is the very evidence of active faith, and it shows submission to divine instruction. When the church gets a constant and consistent presence of active faith, we won't be afraid while serving. We won't serve through doubt, but we'll begin to serve through that cheerful, consistent, unconditional, and fearless love that God poured into our hearts. Therefore, we who are saved by grace will be able to stand and walk on the faith regardless of those who are doubting around us. We see that Peter was surrounded by doubters. who are in the same boat as him. Because Jesus sent all of the disciples before himself. However, we see that Peter was the only one to speak and the only one to leave the boat. I stopped by to encourage somebody today to keep acting by faith. When those who are in the same boat as you don't want to move because of doubt and their own insecurities, when they say don't step out there, and when the ones who are supposed to be cheering for you are the ones planning for your downfall. Realize haters will be haters, doubters will be doubters, but you have to keep on rowing. I talked to one of my high school friends, and she's unmarried, but she has a baby daddy. And she was saying, Brendan, I don't know what to do because I'm interested in going to church, but my baby daddy does not want to go to church. I said, baby, you're going to have to leave baby daddy at the house. Realize haters will be haters, doubters will be doubters, but you have to keep on rowing. Keep the faith and get out of the boat. Although we see that Peter got out of the boat, we also see that Peter takes his eyes off of Jesus. He said the wind and waves takes his eyes. He sees the wind and he sees the waves, and he takes his eyes off of Jesus. And when he takes his eyes off of Jesus, he begins to sink. Peter cries out to the Lord, and Jesus immediately reaches out and catches Peter. See, Peter starts out with good intentions, but his faith falters. However, this does not end up in failure. Peter, even in his very moment of fear, cries out to the Lord, the only one who can help him. Realize Peter doesn't begin to sink until he starts looking around at the wind and looking around at the waves. Church, taking our eyes off of Jesus and focusing on the difficult circumstances will cause us to fall deeper into our problems. But when we cry out to Jesus, he catches us by the hand and raises us out of the seemingly impossible situation. That leads me to my third and final point this morning. I told you I wasn't going to keep you here long. Keeping our mind right assures that there is saving grace in the Son. S-O-N. We see that even though Peter took his eyes off of Jesus and began to sink, Jesus reached out his hand and saved him. The first thing we need to understand is we cannot save ourselves. My grandfather would say, imagine being on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you fall overboard. Because no one saw you fall in, the ship keeps going toward its destination. They leave you hopeless and stranded. After treading water for several hours, you find yourself surrounded by sharks. You are facing certain death at any moment. Exhausted from trying to stay afloat, you slip underwater and begin to drown. Somehow you force your way to the surface for one more gasp of air. As you are about to go under for the last time, a helicopter appears out of nowhere. The rescue squad inside the helicopter throws out a rope and pulls you out of the water just seconds before the sharks move in for the kill. The helicopter flies you back to the shore where you receive treatment in the hospital. After you recover, you begin to brag about how you saved yourself, saying, I'm really proud of my hand. This hand saved me. And let me tell you how I found the helicopter while I was stranded in the middle of the ocean. Just like we cannot save ourselves if we were stranded in the middle of the Atlantic, we are also helpless and hopeless to save ourselves from an eternal hell. Amen. And God doesn't want our help either, because Jesus does all of the saving. Therefore, we have no right to brag about anything that we've done. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for by grace you have been saved through faith. that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not as a result of works, that no one should boast. Your grace is free. We find in the text that Peter got scared of the wind and the waves, and he took his eyes off Christ. Church, when we're on assignment, we cannot be worried about the small wind and wave situations that come in and out of our lives. We can't be trying to figure out what God has already worked out. My word says that if we put our trust in God, if we keep our mind and eyes on him, he'll keep us in perfect peace. I heard a songwriter say, I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore. Very deeply stained within, I was sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea, he heard my despairing cry, and from the waters he lifted me. And now safe am I. I tell you, I've been a bad boy in my life. In my 28 years of living, I have not always done good. But what I love about the Little Bethel Missionary Baptist Church is they taught me that God still loves me. He loves me when I'm right. He loves me when I'm wrong. He loves me when I'm sick, and he loves me when I am well. The proof is that God commended his love toward us in that while we were a sinner, Christ died for you and for me. I tell you, love lifted me. Love lifted me when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. You may be asking, preacher, who is this master of the sea? Well, I'm glad you asked. His name is Jesus. He was born to the Virgin Mother Mary. Jesus, he was placed in a manger because there was no room for him in it. Jesus, 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 Emmanuel, God with us. I love to call him. His name is Jesus. I found him to be my way out of no way. I found him to be Ezekiel's wheel in the middle of the wheel. Jesus, that is deliverer. Jesus, my soul savior. Jesus, my soul redeemer. Can I tell you how he did it? One Friday. One Friday. He died. Yes, he died. Saved the grave. All night Friday. Saved his grave. All day night Saturday. But hey, somebody shout early. Somebody shout early. On Sunday morning. Can I tell you what he did? He got up with all power. All power. All power. The power to heal. The power to save. All power. The power to redeem. All power in his hands. And if you choose it today, you choose to be free. Because who the Son sets free is free indeed. And he sets you free when your chain is broken. When he broke every chain, that break every chain. Won't he do it? That yes he will. I tried it, and I know he will. How do you know, preacher? I tried him for myself. I don't need mommy to tell me. I don't need daddy to tell me. I tried it. And that's why we shout with confidence that after the cross.